Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today, we're taking a trip into Fender territory with one of their newer artist signature guitars that somebody wanted me to review and document through my new Guitar Day program. And since this guitar just happens to be, my favorite Fender shape, as well as one of my favorite colors you can find on a guitar, that's flashy and gaudy anyways, it's like, heck yes, I want to check this thing out. But this is the newest signature guitar from J Mascis of Dinosaur Jr. Prior to this guitar in 2008, he had a really sweet sparkle purple Jazzmaster. It's a really dark plum grape sparkle. I want to review that thing. And then he just recently got a Squier Jazzmaster as well. So generally, when you think J Mascis, you'd normally associate him with Jazzmasters. But this newest collaboration with him and Fender gave us a Telecaster. So let's go ahead and crack this bad boy open because it's got some interesting specs to it. And oh wow, what is going on here? It feels like an aged guitar. That's interesting. So how flashy is flashy? I love it. This is even crazier than I was expecting. This is that kind of the small sparkle flakes. It's not quite as big as whatever that last blue one was. I think it was a Duo Sonic or something that I had reviewed. It had a bit too extreme of a blue sparkle. I thought the flakes were a bit too big. This has it just about right for fancy glam rock stuff. But that's not what Dinosaur Jr. is. They're an alt rock band if you're not familiar with their works. So J Mascis, he looks like this. He's been with Dinosaur Jr. as the guitarist and the lead vocalist ever since its inception in 1984. He's mainly known for using a lot of effects with his guitars, like fuzz and distortion. People like to say he uses his guitar as a weapon to physically attack you with the notes and solos that he can play, but a few of my favorite songs of theirs are Start Choppin', Feel the Pain, and Pick Me Up if you just need a spot to kind of get into their music. But anyways, these bad boys brand new are $13,999.99, so essentially $1,400. It's a made in Mexico Telecaster. It might seem kind of expensive for what it is, but man, this neck, it's... the Fender custom shops, how I tell you, some guys will pay absurd amounts of money to get those things aged and relic, not just simply because of the way it looks, but mainly the way it feels. This guitar has that, I've never felt this on a brand new guitar from Mexico before. They call this road-worn lacquer, which I guess, now that I think about it, is a little bit different than what you would find on the one that has the finished cracking. Because this one has that same forced finish checking that you can see in certain areas, but just the way that they've worn this in, it's I don't even want to describe it as a satin finish. It's more so like a gloss that's just been really worn down, there's bare spots. It's almost like that raw wood feel. Seriously, if you like what I'm describing here, try one of these at a Guitar Center or something around you, whatever local store you have. I think you might be kind of interested in how this feels. I'm definitely impressed. But then you mix it with this, it's just complete sparkle in your face. It's almost a strange mix match would be my first impression of this, but it's nice. It's so strange. I'm confused. Did I get a damaged one, or is this how it's supposed to be? I remember the first time I had seen this finish, though. I believe it was the Chrissie Hynde signature Telecaster, and I thought this one looked very similar to that. I mean, obviously, this one's a little bit more in your face, and if you compare the specs, the radius is a little bit more modern on this one, but they both have a mirror-styled pickguard, so if you like the more vintage attributes, like a 7¼ inch radius, you could always check out Chrissie's signature. That one's $100 more, but you also get a hard shell case, whereas these guys get the gig bag. But this thing was based off of his original 1958 top-loading Telecaster. That's something else that makes this interesting, is the fact that you string it up this way instead of through the body. But let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench, take an individual look at its parts and specs, and then get to that playing demo. Inside the J Mascis Tele, let's learn about this thing. So it's just regular single coil pickups in this one. They just called them J Mascis 58 Telecaster single coils. So the neck pickup looks like this. It's got a red dot on it, 35, and a couple of other marks. And then the bridge, they call it the exact same thing, and it just has some other markings on there. So the electronics are pretty basic in this Telecaster as far as that goes. They don't have any additional routings under here. It's just for your regular single coil pickups. But here's what your cavities look like. It's marked J Mascis in here and then like MGT. I'm not sure if that has something to do with the finish, called Bottle Rocket Blue Flake. So it's definitely a metallic sparkly finish that has some metal flake in it, but they're not giant. It's still smaller than a blue sparkle top Les Paul Deluxe. But anyways, you have easy truss rod adjustment access in here, which I did have to use because direct from the dealer, this setup was absolute trash. It needed a little bit of straightening of the neck. The action needed to be taken down. It was pretty high. I think I've got it dialed in. But what also makes this guitar interesting, besides the aged finish on the neck that we'll talk about here in a minute, is the hardware has also been aged. You can see it here on their website, road-worn neck and road-worn hardware. So what that means is they tried to age it, but what's always weird on these is it's always a little bit shinier on this area, and then they kind of like matte over the finish on down here. It's not always apparent in photos, but when you see this thing in person without all these blinding lights, I mean, here's a really good way to see that, the way that this doesn't reflect anything and this does. I'm personally a fan of the hardware being done up like this because it pretty much permanently has something on it. It's like some scratches and like it looks like it's just caked on fingerprints. But if you're OCD and you hate having fingerprints on all your metal bits on your guitars, this kind of helps cut down on that because you don't notice it as much. They've done up your metal knurled knobs in the same way. But another unique feature about the J Mascis Telecaster is we don't actually have like that pilgrim hat type thing. This is a Stratocaster style tip, which means when you're in the bridge position, it's easier to get it out. So I guess that's why he did that there. And what's nice about this is, unlike the barrel style ones or the pilgrim hat type things, these actually stay on. As far as our pickup readings go, our middle position for fun is 3.23 k ohms, our neck position is 6.75, and our bridge is rocking, 6-ish. Interesting how that is hotter than that. We'll have to see how that sounds. But as far as our electronics, here's what we're rocking. Looks like 250K CTS pots with a red capacitor right there, and this style of a toggle. And as far as this cavity, we just have a regular Fender barcode in there. Now, just like the hardware, what's nice is they also do the mirror pickguard in a very similar way. You see how it's all scratched up like that? I do believe it comes from the factory like that, just to give it that kind of slightly worn in vibe. But they've got that reflective surface on the back and then it just kind of looks like this, viewing it from the back. But there's no pickups attached to this. It just comes off when you take the screws off. So if you wanted to swap it out for a different pickguard, you could. Because let's face it, this is a very flashy Telecaster. It might be too flashy for some guys. But as soon as you go onto the neck, it's like you're looking at a whole different guitar. But now that we're done talking about the alder body, let's talk about this maple neck. So how many frets do we got? We have 21. However, where this guitar differs from most Telecasters that are offered today is these are jumbo frets. Not medium jumbo, not narrow tall, vintage tall, whatever style frets a lot of things have. These are giant frets. Now, I mean, they're not extra jumbos, but jumbos are a pretty good size. You don't see this come stock on too many brand new guitars. You know, from Fender Gibson anyways, that I normally document. So if you're looking for a Telecaster that has big frets and you can deal with how flashy it is, check one of these out, or maybe just buy one of these necks from somebody. But they didn't mess with our scale length. It's still 25.5. And it utilizes a 9.5 inch radius, so not super vintage, but not ultra modern either, just somewhere in between. But not only did they age the neck, they actually aged the fretboard's finish too. Like, if I just told you guys and showed this on Instagram or something and said, hey, vintage Telecaster, it's been played in, doesn't it look good? I bet a lot of people would be like, yeah, it's been refretted, but man, that looks like a nicely worn in neck. So what it looks like to me is they put some sort of like a brown gunk over top of the finish that kind of bleeds into some of the areas, and that causes the frets to kind of get like a hazy look to them. Now, I could take my metal polish cream right here and make these look fantastic, brand new, but then it might not match the look of the neck. And since this is a new Guitar Day purchase, I'm going to leave it as it was new. The only thing that feels a little bit out of place is the fact that they did this whole synthetic bone nut, but it's so white as compared to the rest of the neck. They should have like aged that. This does appear just to be a straight up maple neck. There is no like maple fretboard than maple neck. But anyways, our nut measures 1.68 inches. By the 12th, beefs up to 2.02. They call this a J Mascis custom C-shaped neck. It measures 0.91 at the first. Wow. It stays pretty consistent, 0.94 by the 12th. That's a pretty good sized neck, I would say. Like, those numbers are a little bit misleading because there's a lot of a hump to the back of the neck, so it's more so that it just fills your neck out. Almost slightly soft V-shaped, but it's very rounded, so C. Here's what that looks like at the 1st and the 12th fret. You can see it's pretty narrow here, but very rounded, and then it just kind of flattens up because it gets fatter here. So a pretty interesting neck profile. Moving on to the headstock, we already showed you where you adjust the truss rod on this one, so they just capped that off. But then they've aged our tuners in a beautiful way. You've got this big Fender Telecaster logo, but they've actually dinged up the edges. Like, they went full on relic job here. Like most of the rest of the fretboard and the neck, it's just like a worn finish feel. But they went as far as, putting finish checking here, wearing off some of the edge of the finish, really dinging up the side right here. That is certainly an interesting look on a made in Mexico guitar. Like, normally that stuff's reserved for custom shop. You might not like the look of it, but seriously, go try one of these things. I love the way it feels so far, and I haven't even plugged it in. It just feels like an old friend. Now that we've got it all put back together, oh man, yeah, those adjustments to the action I did in straightening out that neck just makes this a night and day difference. Like, that string was like a good inch off the frets when I had first gotten it, and now it feels very comfortable. Sure, I've got the action just a hair too low in this area now, but everything else is playing effortlessly. The jumbo frets really make it easy to do some bends. But that can also be due to this being a top loader. This doesn't have as much pressure over here, so that does make these Teles a little bit more slinky feeling. Although at the same time, some guys are going to argue you get less sustain out of these because it's not strung through the body. I'll let you decide that for yourself if that's something that you think is worthy of considering in your tonal hunt for the perfect sound. But the backside of the guitar, no routes or anything like that. Pretty regular Telecaster in that aspect. Just that beautiful bottle rocket blue flake finish. With your barrel output jack on the side, strap button in your normal locations. Oh, nice! We even have a serial number on here, MX69. I don't know if that went in order for 2022 when they were making these, or potentially 2021, or if they're marking these individually. But hey, I'm sure there's somebody that would pay a premium for that serial number. But you got your Made in Mexico sticker right here. That's interesting, because I'm just now realizing that we do not have a serial number on the back. It's just on that neck plate. But you do have J Mascis' signature on here. Now, it's not an actual signature. That's just a silkscreen decal type thing. But again, you've got some nicks and dings along the edges. That's just how it came from the factory. I'm curious how the neck is going to fluoresce under blacklight though, because I think that might help you show those wear patterns, because it's a little bit worn down right here, like where you'd go for soloing, and then like in your rhythm area, that's a little bit worn down in that area. But yet there's not a huge difference in the feel between those, and the color looks about right too. Perfect. This is exactly what I wanted to see for the blacklight test. So you can kind of see those areas where we're talking about that there are chips, nicks, and dings along the edges. But the neck, you see that color difference here? So they obviously sprayed this, did their whole technique to get the finish checking in it, right? And then they just kind of sanded this whole neck down. So you can kind of see some of the areas that have a little bit more lacquer to them, and you can kind of see those areas I was talking about that's a little bit more worn, like right there. It just kind of follows a kind of a zigzag shaped pattern, but yeah, that's interesting. That's a little bit time consuming for them to sand the necks down again after they put the finish on it, but I really think somebody could fall in love with this at a guitar store, even if they don't necessarily like the color of it. But everything else on this guitar seems to blacklight the way I would expect it to. I mean, I guess we can take a look at the fretboard real quick. You can see kind of the differences in some of those areas. That must be a real pain in the butt to have to sand some of that stuff down. But very cool. Our last spec to capture is the weight, 7 pounds, 6 ounces on this one. Now, I don't have a fuzz pedal or the kind of distortion that Mr. Mascis uses here, so this might be a little bit different of a take on the tones that this thing can produce, as we will be taking it a little bit more clean and traditional. But I'm sure there's other reviews and demos you can check out if you want to see what this thing sounds like with some fuzz. Let's go ahead and plug it in. All right, let's go ahead and run through these tones. I'll just play some basic riffs, and then I'll do one Dinosaur Jr. style riff for you. Interesting. So the middle position on this guitar, or at least my example, is out of phase. It's got that nasally vibe to it. And yes, looking at the spec sheets, that's the way it's supposed to be. That must be part of his sound on some of his lead solos. I noticed that neck pickup is really deep. I mean, everything about this one for me is all about this bridge. Kind of comes to life when you have a little bit of distortion, so imagine like some fuzz and stuff on top of that. That'd be fun. Now that we know all about the new J Mascis signature Telecaster, what are my final thoughts on this thing? It was not my favorite Telecaster I've ever had. I really like what they're doing with the neck here, but the combination of the way these pickups sound and the whole out of phase thing, it doesn't really do it for me on a Telecaster. But then again, if I was a bigger Dinosaur Jr. fan and I was trying to replicate his tones, I'm sure this would be perfect for somebody who's looking to do that. But I was kind of getting into this thing as a Telecaster thinking it's gonna be like a regular Tele, but for me, it's not a buy, even though it is a pretty darn cool finish. But hey, if you like everything else about this, you can always buy it, wire it up normally if you want, or put some other custom style pickups in here because it's a really cool flashy guitar if you like that, and this neck has something really special going on for it. So all in all, what makes this guitar special is the pickups. They're specially voiced kind of like his. The middle is wired out of phase, and obviously you can reverse that if you want. You get the special cool blingy finish with your mirrored chromed out pick guard and the worn in maple neck with the jumbo frets. I mean, those are some pretty cool specs that makes this guitar unique, even if the sum of all its parts isn't necessarily for me. So, troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.